right, and welcome to the Synchronicity Show. It's your host, Kevin Wathey, and in this episode, I sit down with Dr. Stephanie Rimka. Dr. Rimka BA, DC, BCN is a holistic brain optimization specialist focusing on integrated neuropathies to identify neurotherapies. Thank you. To identify and address the root cause of mental illness, learning disorders, and chronic illness. She has dedicated over 25 years to learning the best practices in functional medicine from masters in their fields. Dr. Rimka is active in private practice, seeing clients one-to-one, teaching online group courses in her e-learning center, leading healing group retreats internationally, which I know we're going to talk about today, teaching continuing education certification to Georgia doctors, advising on a scientific advisory board, and most importantly, raising her teenage son, Bennett. Dr. Rimka is the winner of the People Choice Awards 2020 for Best Mental Health Practice in Buckhead via Atlanta Best Medical Group. Dr. Rimka is leading a safari coming up next year, which we're going to talk about today in depth, I'm sure. And I mean, there's more than meets the eye on this, and I'm excited to dive into this conversation with you, Stephanie. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm so excited to be here. This is super fun.
I am stoked to have you too. And there was slight technical errors before we dove in today. So I appreciate you for hanging with me in there. But I want to dive right in, and in the kind of, in between chit chat before we hopped on today, we were talking about something, and because you have a retreat coming up, there was Freedom Airways, or hashtag Freedom Airways as it is on Twitter. What is that? Or please explain to me a little bit about that and Dolores Cahill and what she's working to accomplish.
Yeah, so Professor Dolores Cahill, she's a PhD in the health space, a virologist, and she's kind of become a big voice and has taken a stand for against scientism and misinformation and propaganda in the news and from governments, and violation of human rights and civil rights. And she has taken a very large stand. She's in Ireland. So she's a part of that area, but she's all over the place. If people haven't, found her, you're going to mostly find her on BitChute or Library. She's pretty much been banned on things like YouTube and Instagram or whatever, Twitter and all that. But she is a part of a consortium that's standing for freedom with doctors, a World Freedom Alliance, and standing for free travel. Because again, if you're a scientist, a lecturer, and an educator, normally you travel a lot. I was traveling a lot. I was on stages a lot. You're speaking a lot. This is what we do. This is what she does. And if you suddenly are being forced into a medical intervention against your will to travel, it's a sticky area. So she offers a lot of information around legality and how to get around things and using verbiage, but she has started Freedom Airways, Freedom Travel. And so I've become a member, and I suggested to you to become a member. It's like small membership, and they're trying to get it together. So we have some control and don't feel so powerless with the powers that be of what might be coming in the future around travel, because I love traveling. I used to be at a beach 5-6 times a year, family vacations with my son, and that's all come to a screeching halt. My safari was canceled, right? South Africa got shut down. And we've moved the dates out to accommodate myself and how my group members, people who are going, how we want to be treated by an airline and treated on an airplane. So we might be using, Freedom Air. It's not up and running yet, but they're looking for resources, funding, connections, pilots, travel agents, and members. And they have meetings, private Zoom meetings, and we talk about the future and what we all can actually do to empower ourselves to get things how we want them to be.
Thank you for sharing that a lot. And I actually didn't know about that prior to this episode. And I appreciate learning something new, especially with retreats and travel and kind of the approach to business that I've taken over the years. And I'd be curious from a medical perspective, or from your standpoint. Obviously, the pandemic has affected people in a multitude of ways. Some of those are ones that maybe don't meet the eye. And travel and the implications that then come with it can be one that's almost a kind of like ancillary or side effect What other things due to the pandemic or due to maybe to the virus specifically, if we're going to a medical standpoint, have you seen that are maybe offshoots or things that aren't necessarily recognized by the general public?
Well, in general, I don't see any big issues to a cold. I see issues from the way the response, an over response, an irrational response, a response that took away people's freedoms of movement and freedoms of being. So, because I specialize in mental health issues and work with a lot of children with autism, learning disabilities, people who have PTSD. So, you don't get PTSD unless you went through a shit ton of trauma. Okay. And so a lot of times I think we throw out the phrase PTSD and people just think, oh, it's this bad thing. I'm like, I need you to understand most of that came from someone got the shit beaten out of them. They were choked out. They were raped. They, had a bomb explode near them. They watched people die in a car crash right next to them. Something really bad happened. So sometimes I think people kind of forget that. And the rape numbers all over the world in this country are outrageous. So the majority of PTSD women that see me, usually it's because they were raped. So, and when you rape a woman, you're usually going to muzzle her and choke her out. So imagine putting on a mask trying to grocery shop like that. So I've seen a resurgence of severe, like PTSD or anxiety coming out of nowhere in women that have had this handled and haven't had anything trigger them in a very, very long time because no one's ever muzzled them. Since that moment, right? So a lot of sleep disturbances, a lot of families with the moms now, with the kids at home where they were going and getting some support and therapies. Therapies got shut down. The school systems got shut down. Mothers have no respite care. So if you have a child with a special needs, a brain-based behavioral disorder, any of those, it's been pure hell on these families. If you have a child that's struggling with any mental health issues, the anxiety and depression has gone off the charts, and suicide rates and suicidal ideation have gone off the charts. Alcoholism, recidivism, drug addiction, recidivism, child molestation, gone through the roof. That's what I've been seeing. That's what I've been dealing with, right? So that's the stuff that like people aren't wanting to talk about, but that's the reality of it. And that's what most of my time, after the first 6 to 8 weeks, when we were like, oh God, okay, like what's going on? And we're all diving into immune system protocols and all kinds of fancy things, and let's stack this, and what about peptides, and looking at what it was doing, and the red blood cells and the spike proteins. We were all doing all of that to a level of exhaustion. Most of us were 18, 20 hours a day, reading everything we could. Every doctor I knew who helped patients we were in private forums, doing Zoom calls with each other, in private chats. Everyone's sharing so much data, what is working, what's not working. It was exhausting. And then we saw, it should have been a major relief. Oh my God, it's not as bad as we thought. This is awesome. All you got to do is boom, 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 and you're fine. But turns out that wasn't seen as good information or a sigh of relief. And as you figured out what supplements and what medications to use in combination, and as doctors were coming out saying, this doesn't look like a coronavirus, this doesn't look like a flu, this looks like a blood, low oxygen altitude sickness. What the hell? We shouldn't be venting anybody. We should do this. As everybody was figuring that out, that we had bad data from a bad computer algorithm model, it just seemed to get worse and worse and worse. And then they banned the drugs and they banned the treatments and they fired doctors. And that's when suddenly we went, wait a minute, what just happened here? Right? So yep, there was that fatigue and that exhaustion, us figuring it out and then going, oh, okay, we kind of overreacted, but okay, that's cool. And we thought it would change, but then it didn't. And so you have an entire industry also of therapeutic schools. So there are whole schools for children that are called therapeutic schools, and they can be therapeutic boarding schools. It decimated that industry. Many are shut down, they're out of business, they're gone. So now if you have a child who needs help, you can't get it. The dyslexic school shut down, the kids with anxiety or OCD or tic disorders. Good luck with that family. Good luck. But that doesn't get talked about at all.
In your opinion, why do you think that is? why is it kind of pushed away or shunned?
There's no real money in talking about that. What are they going to do about it? Right? When have we really cared about children? When have we really cared about old people? I mean, let's just tell the truth. We don't. We don't. You will get no time in prison for molesting your own daughter, or you'll get 20 years for robbing a bank. That's how it works. There's not a whole lot of protection for children, period. And we're living in delusional land if we think there is. You know, it wasn't very long ago that women and children were just chattel anyway and property to be given away. And the husband and fathers could do whatever they want with them, right? So we're still there. We're still there. And I think all the schools, quite frankly, should be held liable. I'm looking for trials and I'm looking for retribution because they psychologically damage an entire generation based on misinformation and nonsense. And very few schools, very few adults had the courage to stand up and protect children. And that's unforgivable to me.
So to boil this down and to look at kind of like the why behind the what, is this strictly from a monetary perspective and that's the reason why? Or are there other things that play here?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, really, we come down to, I don't know why. None of us are going to know why. I'm not in the mindset of these creatures that are in charge. Okay. So I don't know what they're doing and why they're doing it, but I can look at things and go, that doesn't make sense. That isn't following rational thought. That's not following facts. That is not in the best interest of the neurological development of children. This is going to impair them. This is trauma. So why are they doing that? I mean, to me, you know, intention equals results. If the result is you have a bunch of kids that are anxious, disordered, suicidal, insecure, uneducated, restless, had no physical outlets, left their teams, isolated, disconnected from their parents and their grandparents. I mean, I don't know, that's the result. So what the hell was their intention? You know, it just looks like it's pretty obvious to me, but I don't know. I can't speak to other people, why they do anything. I just look at intention equals results, and that's the result. So if it was to foster, support, love, and nurture children, we wouldn't have done what we did, because that's not what we did.
Mm-hmm. That's a completely different intention altogether than what we're seeing.
Absolutely.
Take me back a second. You had spoke just previously on a lot of people having to revisit certain traumatic moments from past elements or areas of their life because of what has happened presently. Yeah. What or how do you address that? What is the smartest way to go about that for maybe someone who isn't as, I don't know, set up for success or positioned in a way where they have the ability or understanding of how to work through these things themselves?
Well, one, they should not work through this themselves. If you're going through this, step one, I beg you to not feel shame for it, right? And it isn't a little thing. They've used the shame and the virtue signaling. It's just a mask. It's just, you know, and I have never been raped. I have never had that happen to me. I've never had somebody cover my mouth while I was being violently violated. But that is an overwhelming story that goes on with children and with adults. Okay. So now that you may have had this handled and this hasn't come up and you're happily married and your life has been amazing and you're grateful and all the things, but suddenly having that happen is starting to trigger things back somatically right back out of you and neurologically. Please hold no shame for it. Reach out to someone and get some help. Go back to your old therapist. This is not a failure. You know, you need support. I don't think they should be trying to go through this themselves. The first thing is you have to reach out to somebody who deals with trauma and start working through that. And they may teach you techniques, you know, let's say a DBT therapist and they're mindfulness. They have whole techniques. They're teaching you how to relate to your body, how to get that out. Breathwork techniques for trauma are available. There's yoga for trauma, you know, specialized trauma yoga to release. There's somatic release techniques. Neurofeedback will help with that. Hypnosis will help. EFT tapping could help. I don't care how they get help, but they need to get someone to help them. You please do not do it alone. That's the biggest message, right? Because we have to tap into that neurological access door to what that is. And my biggest lesson is, remember that trauma is there as an opportunity to heal further. There was still a wound there that it was like a really old scar. Like I had a C-section, emergency section. That scar most of the time does not bother me. It is 15 years old, but occasionally if something scrapes on, like pushes, it'll burn and tingle. And I'm like, wow, what was that? So it hasn't fully healed, right? Maybe I need to do something. So no difference, the same thing. Like, wow, something was a little bit raw and unresolved that you thought was, it's good enough, right? And now we have something that's scratched it, irritated it, and given you an opportunity to heal it further. That's the best probably advice I could give. Please get help. Please reach out to somebody who's specialized in trauma. If you have no financial resources, find some pastor, somebody, some kind of way. DM people like me. We will try our best, because you shouldn't be doing it alone.
What does maybe your approach, or how would you address that personally yourself if someone reached out to you and came to you? What would be the first?
Oh yeah, I mean, I see it all the time. That's what I've been doing. That's what I've literally been doing. So those kinds of things. I mean, I have to know which each client, you have to know their door. You have to know the access route inside to their psyche and to their neurology, right? There's going to be a physical access point. Like some people, exercise will work great for them. Other people, it's not going to do the same thing. It's actually going to make them feel worse, right? Some people, I can go with a lot of supplementation. I'm like, I can deal with the neurotransmitters and do a lot of amino acid therapy and maybe just add, they already know EFT tapping, and we just work on that a little bit. Some people, I know that they have these devices that we use, like a V light for alpha brain waves or gamma waves, or they've gotten off on the meditation. We do that. But a lot of it is just like weekly therapy. You're talking and coaching, and often just holding space and being a container for them to talk. And I connect them back with their therapist or one of my therapists. And we say, like, this is serious, and you deserve to take this opportunity as your own, hashtag great reset, and heal the trauma that's inside of you, and don't blow it off, and let's go into it. So I look at their sleep and their nutrition, and the dream state. I also do a lot of like kind of esoteric pranic stuff, and we'll get into chakra healing and esoteric healing and dream state, kind of multidimensional stuff. So I do that for clients as well.
I'm glad you bring that up, because that's something that I found fascinating, doing a little bit of research on you and kind of seeing the stuff that you post online and kind of what pushes your buttons or makes you tick. And
I don't post any woo-woo, do I? I think I hide the woo-woo, but I do the woo-woo.
I would say, there's not a lot of it, but there are little bits and pieces there. I'm trying to read between the lines on some things. Yeah. But something that I find fascinating is kind of like how we got to this point, how you got to this point in your life, and what happened or didn't happen leading up to bring you to where you are today. And as like a reverse engineered question, I want you to take me back. What was it that you initially wanted to be when you, quote, grew up? What was that? Take me back to the early years.
Well, I would say, my mom would say, I always wanted to be a doctor. Okay. But I did. It was like that, like a veterinarian or doctor. I was debated because I would do a lot of bug surgery when I was a child. I collected a lot of bugs and animals. I had so many aquariums. My mom let me have so many bugs, and I thought I really was operating. Sometimes I look back now, I'm like, what was I doing to those worms? I
have to pause you for a second. Explain to me bug surgery. What did this look like as a child?
So...
Did you have an operating room in your house?
No, I would like do it outside, right? So there'd be ants or a bug, or if something was smashed, I would try to save the worm. I would get like, thorns and see if I could cut them open and fix them. I would do it with birds. I would do it with all kinds of things. I would do it with things. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
So I was struggled with doctor for human or doctor for animals. And, ultimately, I think I'm so sensitive around animals, them dying. And after my pet cat died. I had it for 18 years and I was so distraught. I was like, I don't think I can do that. Like if one of their jobs is to put animals to kill them, to euthanize, I'm like, I can't do it. I'm not doing it. So I think I'll just stick with people because I don't think I'll cry as much when they die. That was my answer at like 18. I'm like, I'm good. I'm not going to do that vet school thing. So I wanted to be, I toyed with that. I always was fascinated by inside and the guts of things and what it looked like and cutting things open and stuff like that. Right. And, but then I discovered like about 3, I remember it was very unique what a philanthropist was. And I think I was doing like a crossword puzzle from the paper or something because I could read very young at 3. And so I was doing something like that. And then it's like the word came up and it was like, oh, I'm like, well, what is that? My mom told me what it was. And that was what I wanted to be. I was like, I want to be a philanthropist. I want to be so wealthy that I just help people with money. Like you just do wonderful things in the world. That's what I'm going to do. And I was, we were very poor. So I was like, I got to get some money. I'm like, the doctor thing is a great way to do that. So then I'll become a doctor and open up free clinics and in the inner city and in India and all this stuff. And I didn't quite do that, but that's where it kind of happened. And then there was also that moment that broke my heart because I wanted to be a jockey as well. And my brothers teased me. I used to draw out my outfits and all the things I really was planning because I love horses. I'm going to be a jockey. And I was trying to like, yeah, one day. And then they're like, you can't because you're a girl. And of course I didn't. I was like, I was all fighting with them. I'm like, I can do anything. They're like, there aren't any, because we would watch the Kentucky Derby every year on TV. It's like this big deal. And like, see, I'm like, well, I'll be the first one. I don't care, whatever. But then the come to Jesus moment, my mom had to explain. She's like, you're already taller than all of those men. Like it ain't gonna happen and you're 7. I was like, oh. She's like, you would have to be like, you can't, you're too big. I was like, oh, I can't be a jockey. She's like, well, I'll take you horseback riding, but I don't know if that should be your career goal. So that's when I said, okay, I'll just be a doctor.
Do you still, and correct me if I'm wrong here, do you see the practice as still being a kind of a means to an end of your philanthropic work? Or is it something completely different now? Has it kind of morphed?
So, at the end of the day, I can't escape health and my passion for like health and truth. And I've had every astrological chart done on myself, every Myers-Briggs, every Enneagram, I go into all that know thyself stuff. And it really is, I'll just go, because I almost quit many times. Like I almost quit school. I retire. I open a practice. I close it, whatever. I take breaks, whatever. And I go flip houses or do some real estate, something. Because I did struggle with making money, helping sick people. Like that became a real, like, I don't like this feeling. Like, I just want it to be free. And like, why do I have to, but I'm like, but I have to charge because like it all costs a lot of money and I need to eat, like it was a real struggle for me to be okay with that exchange for a while. But I've learned to accept, like, I can't escape it. It is the way all my planets are with it, like you couldn't have done anything else on earth, but do what you do. Right. So I think it's all a part of it because if I suddenly could accrue $300 million, all of my philanthropic stuff would be about health. Like that's what I'm going to do. Right? Like I'm going to fund every autism family for holistic therapies like you've never seen before. Right? I'm going to build the best school that's going to have brain therapies integrated. And it's going to be for all the kids everybody wants to throw away. I'm like, oh no, we'll bring them. I'm going to fix all of it. Watch, so I can't, that's what it would end up being. I wouldn't actually save the animals and stuff like that I used to do. I'm like, no, I'm going to save the humans. Because it's important, especially people with mental health and brain-based disorders, because it's expensive and it's tricky and they don't get love, attention, or good science in the Western model at all.
It's like no matter how far you move to one side or the other, it's always that kind of tether pulling you back. Yeah. And why the brain? Why brain health? Is there a specific reason that maybe your medical practice didn't shift towards one or the other and it actually came to kind of brain health, brain optimization, and all things the mind?
Yeah, sure. So certainly I didn't make the connection at the time. But one of my patients, who is an amazing DBT therapist, a psychotherapist, once she was on my table and I'm doing something and she just popped her head up and she goes, "So who in your family had the personality disorder?" I said, "What?" She goes, "Well, clearly you grew up with it, because there's no way you would be this good at what you do unless this was like, you're normal." And I just kind of laughed. I'm like, huh. I was like, wow, there's probably a lot of those. I'm like, my grandma this, my dad, I kind of like rattling off. So I think I grew up with so much mental health stuff that I saw as kind of the destruction of my family was because of mental illness that would lead to alcoholism or drug addiction and things like that, that I wanted to save other people from going through that. And I didn't think of it like, woe is me, I went through so much. So I didn't think of it like that at all. But it was more like really my mission. So, okay, my father went to prison when my mom was pregnant with me. He robbed a bank. Okay. So I went to prisons my whole life to have a relationship with my dad, my very normal. And so I hung out a lot of prisoners and all kinds of stuff like that, right? And I've gotten prison jail homemade cards my whole life and homemade jail presents, and that was my childhood. And my brother was severely dyslexic, but they didn't know what that was back then. I mean, he's older now. Had severe anxiety, would have been diagnosed today with OCD, maybe Asperger-ish or whatever, something like that. And he would definitely have some very strange psychotic hallucinations and all kinds of stuff. He became a drug addict and he robbed us all the time, and drug dealers came in on my house and firebombed the house. I mean, this is just stuff I grew up with because of drug addiction. And, my dad's there because he was an alcoholic. And it just was like, I want to help these people and I didn't know I was trying to do that, right? But it was kind of like, there's a lot of kind of throwaway kids like me that end up with parents in prison, and we're kind of left alone. There's no child support. There's no family. The spouse left out, ashamed and ostracized, and nobody wants to be a part of that. And we had to lie about it all the time, where he was. And I got in a lot of trouble because I didn't lie about it, because I'm like, I'm over it. What's the big deal, right? So it was really that, right? It was really, that's what I'm trying to help. But I thought I was working with schizophrenics in a mental hospital in group homes, trying to get them to group homes in Michigan. And I wanted to help them. I'm like, I want to help mentally ill schizophrenics and drug addicts, so they don't get thrown into the street, locked into an institution, or go to prison. And I thought I'd be going into the prisons to get them out. I realized that's really hard and like probably not going to happen. Like, let me get to the kids. Let me get to these kids with ADHD, autism, panic, cutting, feeling bad about themselves because, they're dyslexic, they can't read, or they have an auditory processing disorder, and somebody calls them stupid and gives them a drug. No, like I thought, if I can get into that pocket, I can help change a life forever. Right. So that's what drove me. And that's all about the brain. That's really what it was.
So essentially you approached working with children because you wanted to treat the underlying cause as they begin to grow up, rather than placing a kind of patch on the symptom later on.
Right. And really the thing was, so they don't become drug addicts, alcoholics, and go to prison.
Exactly.
That really is it. That was where I'm at. Like, yep.
So you make the shift at a pivotal moment in their life, so that later on that they had this kind of tipping point at an earlier age before they became a drug addict and alcoholic, or went to prison themselves.
And that their parents can understand it as well, because that's a huge thing to understand. So you can stop punishing a child, getting them in trouble, not thinking, the wrong thing about like they're not motivated, and something like, no, that's not what's going on here. And often you have the occasional moment where the child is totally fine and it's really the parent. You're like, he's fine. You are super high strung and overly anxious. And that's what you just see as neutral. What you call neutral, you think is lazy. He's fine. Like, he's going to be what he's going to be, right? He's going to be just fine. Or they're not interested in the same thing. And while I was in grad school, my nephew was diagnosed with autism. So that's where the whole autism thing came in, but that's still brain-based, right? So, and they would call that on the mental illness spectrum in autism, they have so much anxiety, depression, OCD, tics, seizures, brain-based things are concomitant with also everything going on there. So that's where that one came in. I wouldn't have necessarily known if I would have done that, but that's my sister's son, and she's my favorite person. So I'm like, she called me for help, and I said, I'll help you. And then I had to devour and learn all of that. You can't learn autism unless you learn the brain. So it just all made sense, right?
Do you think there's an element of it in which when you were growing up, you saw what you didn't want, so you're now moving to a position of something that you then did?
Well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, it has to be, right? We're gonna do two things. Life is, fuck yes and fuck no, right? Mm-hmm. Hopefully you're going with the fuck yeah, that's what I want, or fuck no, I don't want that, right? And unfortunately, we talk ourselves into a yes when we know it was a no all the time, right? So your life can be a creation of, I want this, and so I'm going to build for it. Or you can actually come up with the same result, and it was all a fuck you to your dad, or a fuck you to your mom, or, you know what I mean? People like end up doing that. Like, they said I couldn't, so I'm going to do this, right? So of course, I'm sure that's there. I never saw myself as ever going down that path. It wasn't like, oh, I'm so afraid of I'll end up there, or anything. But yeah, it was. I believe, I think there was a lot. I definitely had a chip on my shoulder around, like, there wasn't a fair playing field, right? I saw my brother didn't get some of the same opportunities, and I saw people way worse than them with a ton of money just getting off because they could just attorneys, and they could all these rich kids were drug addicts, but they weren't getting in trouble for it. They just their parents just bought them into a new college. It just was like, wow, okay. So there was some of that for sure, but I've always just been kind of driven by, I'm a definite underdog person. If you're the underdog in the room, I got your back, I'm like, what? So I'm usually going to pick that person other than side with the already winner. I've learned to balance out a little bit, but that's what I was always sticking up for the kid or whoever that was getting picked on. Yeah. You're going to come through me. Yeah.
I feel like the vast majority of people are as well, because that then makes for the best story as well.
Yeah. I didn't see myself as an underdog, but I kind of was, I was, but I didn't perceive myself that way, which I think was a good thing. I think otherwise I would have had like pity party too much. But I'm the youngest of 4 kids, and my brothers and sister will say things at times about what I was like as a kid. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? They're like, oh my God, you were so sickly and so pitiful. And you'd always blah, blah, blah. You would just get we would get a cold and you would get pneumonia. You would get this. I had to wear those Forrest Gump cables, on my legs. So I don't remember. I mean, I remember, but I have no visual in my mind of me wearing those cables. And I had to wear them 23 hours a day. My mom actually held me back. I could have gone to kindergarten, it was my birthday's in January. So it was like, I could have started the year before, but I would have had to wear the braces. And she's like, I don't want her to feel so different or whatever. She would feel, I guess I would cry I don't remember. But when my brother saw that movie, he goes, oh, I thought of you, and run, Forrest, run. And when his cables broke like he used to wear. And I was like, what are you talking about? I went, oh, right. I wore those cables. So I think, I was seen as very skinny and weak and scrawny, and the cables. And so I would get picked on, and I just made it a point to be, the strongest beast in the room, and said that was a mistake. So I was kind of like the unexpected whatever, but I didn't think of myself that way. I still don't think of myself that way. Right. But I'm like, oh yeah, people kind of felt sorry for me. They thought I was pitiful.
you don't remember that because you were so young or because it was a traumatic experience for you?
No, well, I remember. I have no visual of me. So every
Mm.
picture in my mind of myself, and I'm an extremely visual, I've just deleted those. So like the residual self-image, like you saw in the Matrix, where Neo had the hair. He's like, what? So it's your residual self-image. He saw himself with hair. I never see myself with those cables on. I only remember them hanging on my mom's closet door, the white leather. I know what they look like. I see pictures of me wearing them, and I know what I would feel like when I would see those pictures. I felt weak and shame, and I didn't want anybody to see those because I thought I was like, the Green Hulk. I thought I was like the strongest thing ever, and you can't tell me I can't do it. And there was a lot of that where she would say, "Why would you not back down?" And I'm like, "Wait, why would I?" She's like, "He's like got 100 pounds on you, and he's 5 years older." I'm like, "So I could take him." I was kind of like that. Kind of like my 20-pound dog that thinks he's a 300-pound mastiff. I was kind of that person as a kid.
Where does that stem from? Because there's quite a few people, even ones that I know, who it's sometimes, and dogs even in particular, sometimes the smallest dog has like the biggest bite, and is it overcompensating for something, or is it that actually how you then view the world, because it's your perception of reality that really drives what you see things and how you interact as yourself?
Well, we get all our scripts before by the time we're 2 years old, right? You have all these unconscious scripts given to you. That's what social psychology is very clear on this. And I definitely agree. I've seen it too much. So by the time I'm there too, you already have given to you from your parents and the environment around you. You do a little bit of forming, but it's mostly given to you. That's why these things just keep going on in families over and over again until you can shift it. So I already thought what I thought of men and women and safety and how I was. So I can't exactly tell you why I thought I was so strong and why I thought I was so badass. They're probably, if we want to get woo-woo, probably my soul that has come in, and probably the situation of where I came from in my other lives brought a lot of that energy. So I'll just tell some stories about it. Supposedly, I've had so much spiritual work done and I've been trained in all this stuff. This is the first time I've ever been a woman. So, my understanding of myself, my big mentor who trained me for 25 years, Barry, he died about a year or two ago. I mean, he was my hands-on main guy. He was my physical teacher, my clinical, he's a doctor. He was my spiritual stuff. I mean, we did so, he was my guy for the last 25 years. And he used to call me when I first walked in, like I was carried in, I couldn't walk. He would call me the Ogre. And often when I used to, not anymore so much, I would walk in a room and say, I'm getting healing from a spiritual healer or something like that. And they would have this look and they'd get scared. And I'm like, what? I'm like, holy shit, who is that? And they would call and say I was very big guy. They called him the Ogre. He's like, he's ugly. He's got a scar on his face. And so in general, you've killed so many people, like you are no joke, right? And I'm like, like I know it. But it caused a lot of confusion. And he kind of really helped me with that. And he's like, this must really mind fuck you because you look like you look, but you think you're ugly, don't you? I'm like, yeah. He goes, but didn't you model? I'm like, yeah. He's like, I go, I don't understand it. It feels really weird to me that people would pay me to take my picture because I think I'm ugly. And I don't get it. And he's like, it's because you are the Ogre. You are ugly. He's like, I can see you. You know what I mean? And so there's this great merging of my feminine and masculine that I've had to work on. And he helped me tremendously with that. And becoming a mother was finally this embracing of the divine feminine that I am. But yeah, so I've been told this is your first rodeo as a woman, and it just certainly confuses you. And because, I think I'm this huge guy that just can take anybody.
I want you to unpack this a little bit more for me, because this is really, really interesting to me. How do you then, knowing that you're the Ogre, but you are who you are presently, how do you then approach life? Is it through how you see yourself right now, or how you saw yourself in the past? Or is it now the work that you've done to pull the two together and you've created this
together? Yeah, it's definitely together. The union, it's harmonization, right? It really is the divine masculine within me harmonizes the divine feminine. They are not in competition. And I think people don't understand that enough. They talk about the rising of the feminine, and it is happening in the collective consciousness. The planet is shifting, but people are still thinking of it in a hierarchical form, like the feminine is going to come above the masculine. It's not how it works. I need the masculine to harmonize and direct me. You need that linear, like, hierarchical organization, get shit done energy to organize my incredibly holistic, see everything, put everything together in a holographic way, and be watching everything. I can know everything that's happening in a room with 100 people simultaneously, but that can overwhelm women a lot of times if they don't have enough masculine energy to do that. So Barry helped me. I did a lot of work around this, and really it was the contrast of embracing. I was afraid of the ogre because I didn't know how to have a boundary and protect myself without going to violence. And when I became a mother, and that was okay when I was younger, because when I grew up in Detroit, I mean, I fought. I mean, my first time at a rodeo in a street fight. Like, this was back in the 70s and the 80s, and you could get jumped with bricks and locks and chains. This was how it was. And I was a part of that. Okay. So I know how to take a hit. I know how to get knocked out. I've been knocked out. I know how to knock somebody out. Now I'm almost 50 years old, right? So you can't do that. I learned very young, like, oh, there's places I can throw a punch, and there's places you cannot. You can't do that at school. You can't do that in these places. These people, if they insult you or they do something, you can't just strike them. You can't knock them in the trachea. So what are you going to do? Right? You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you just got to crush a trachea and move on. Other times you got to use words. I'm just telling you, right? So I had to learn.
This is not how I thought this conversation was going to go.
I mean, I'm sorry if it's more, but I had to learn
Dr.
how to,
Rimka coming in and crushing tracheas on the podcast today.
My father taught me how to kill a man about 100 ways, and like, that's what we would do. And he came home for 1 year of my life when I was between 7 and 8 years old, whatever. And every weekend it was okay. And he just drilled me. And he's 6'4", 225 pounds. And it was, let's do it again. I knew how to gouge out everything, take down. I mean, do it again, do it again, do it again. So if a guy that big tried to grab me, he's taught me what to do about it, and taught me, don't you ever pick the fight. Don't you ever do. So I always had a rule. They had to hit me first. So I'll take the first one. Go ahead. And then it's on. I had a really long reach, so that's my big asset. So he's like, well, stick and move, right? So anyway, so I learned I had to honor the ogre that I was, and teach him, right? Like, so what happened when I became a mother, I became so ultra feminine and so soft and so, like, I can't acknowledge any of this. And I tried to hide it from my son so severely that it was actually probably at cause in some of his anxiety. And I actually attracted some stalkers, and I had to get restraining order. It was really weird. And I told him, like, what the heck is going on? People are usually afraid of me. They like part the seas when I walk down, like, I'm usually the person, I don't know why, but they move when I go down. I don't move out of the way when I walk on a sidewalk. So what's going, why is this happening? I was crying, I'm terrified. And this guy's a lunatic, and he shows up at my office, and I'm like, wah. And he's like, that's because you're afraid of the ogre, right? You forgot who you are. Da, da, da. So I had to learn to bring that back, and I had to stop hiding it. And it was learning that these two can be harmonized, and I could be strong and have boundaries and respect the masculine could be on board. And I did not need to go to violence. I did not need to hurt anyone. So it was an interesting trick, because I had to acknowledge I'm not a man. I'm like, oh, there would be times when I'm like, there'd be a confrontation with a big ass man facing me down, and we're at it, whatever, about to go. And I'm like, oh shit, I actually probably can't take him right now. You know what I mean? Like, around 19, 20, I had a moment with a guy in college, and he assaulted several women. and me, and I was the one. I thought I'm going to take him. He was a college basketball player at my school, and he was kicked out after that whole incident, but he was high. He was high and drunk, and it was ugly. And girls were screaming and crying, and I had to get him out of that room, and it was real ugly what was about to go down. With a bottle in my hand, I'm like, am I going to have to, And I had to and it was a hard moment for me where I realized I'm not a 6'4" guy. This guy could kill me. Like if he punches me, I might not get up. And so it was the first moment of like, oh, what do I do now? Right. So I used my mind and I got him out of that room. But, and so from that moment, I had to be like, what am I? Who am I? I'm not 6'4" and 200 some pounds. Like I feel like I am. I'm more feminine than I realized. So I really had to develop my feminine aspects and get into that. And becoming a mother was the absolute, it's very easy. And that nurture, it was amazing. So now the two are together, and I had to have some real conversations with my son and explain to him, oh, I will hurt somebody if they come in this house. And do you need me to teach you how to take somebody down? You want to learn how to box? He goes, yeah. I was like, okay, let's do it. So, and it changed everything to say like, yeah, I don't need to hide that part of me anymore to protect him from a life I don't want him to know about,
That must give you an overwhelming sense of confidence as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of stupid how much at times in certain situations, right? Like certain things are just, I don't even think about it. I'm smart. I mean, I have my street smarts to know, oh yeah. I mean, I just make the assumption everybody is not right. And I don't need to prove it, like you can tell with people like they're almost looking for it. I'm like, I don't have to look for that. My energy is such that it just doesn't come, but I feel ready if it does.
Yeah, but you knew if anything ever did happen, you were prepared.
Yeah. And I didn't have any cowardice to help somebody else. I mean, that's to me where we also need to focus on. If you're not competent, in protecting yourself or someone else, you're not going to have courage to do anything. Right.
Yeah.
So why I can hear trauma stories and all this other stuff, because it doesn't scare me, and even some therapists are afraid of like really intense cases. And so I attracted the kinds of therapists that are like, oh no, I see the worst of the worst. I see the people that everybody else is afraid to see. And I'm like, they go, and so do you. And so I see the cases that people are afraid of. And when my mentors, with certifications or all kinds of stuff, they would review, you got to review cases and stuff to get sort of board certifications and all, whatever, different certifications. And they're like, wow, it's another classic Rimka case, because I don't think I would have accepted this patient. I'm like, yeah, I know. But if I don't, who will? If all of you are afraid to take these people, that's why they don't get help. I mean, I'm honest if I'm like, I never saw this before, but I'm going to do everything I can to help get you better. If somebody's got to do it, right? So I'm not afraid of the dark, the ugly, the broken down, the beaten. You know what I mean? It actually fuels me. I'm like, they told you what? They told you can't get better. Okay. That just pisses me off enough to make sure we get you better.
Do you feel like you're the last line of defense in a way?
Almost always. I mean, it would be, 100 times easier. It's changing though. I will say people are getting much more proactive and much more disgusted with the results and the shenanigans in allopathic medicine and the flow chart medicine of here's some symptoms, take this drug, and spending 5 to 7 minutes with you. I mean, they're seeing it's such a scam and a con, and nobody can get better that way in general. I mean, it just doesn't work. I mean, you'd have to be the world's greatest, just magician, intuitive, whatever, to be like, oh, in 5 minutes, that must be a problem. Here you go. I mean, it just doesn't work. So people are starting to come a lot sooner. But in general, the majority of my practice is they've been hospitalized 7 to 10 times. They've tried 27 psychiatric medications. Electric shock treatment didn't work. I mean, the typical conversations, I'll have to call and check in with their psychiatrist. And I'm like, okay, where are we with active suicide? Where are we with if I'm deciding, should I take them? Are you going to work with me or whatever? And I can't tell you how many times I've heard from their attending doctor or right from the institution, the psych ward where they're coming from, is there any way you could possibly make it worse? I'm like, no. They're like, then do whatever you need to do because we have no options. It can't get much worse. I mean, she's already tried to kill herself 7 times and is on that many. I mean, how can you, you're not going to do worse, right? I go, no, I'm not. But okay. So now they're traumatized in the hospitals. They're traumatized when they go here. I mean, the drug situation. So it's much harder to fix it after 5, 7, 10 years down the road, or one of the worst scenarios that happens all the time, a child with autism, their pediatrician or the horrific Marcus Institute attached to the CDC that doesn't seem to know anything about autism, and they're right down the street from me, tells parents, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing with the diet that's going to do anything. They need Risperidol and, SSRIs, and you just have to medicate. You can do some speech language. You can, do that, maybe some ABA therapy. And then 3 years later, they somehow find out about whatever, me, or they call, I'm like, what? And so we've lost 3 years of no changes in nutrition in their gut. And poisoning the brain continuously. They have had no brain therapies, no detoxification. It'll happen so much. And I just think it's honestly quite criminal at this point for anybody who would see a child with autism to have zero education or training in gastrointestinal health, neurotransmitters, toxicity, gluten-free, dairy-free diets, to not understand the GAPS diet, to not understand the specific carbohydrate diet, to not understand neurofeedback. It's criminal. So, but I see it all the time.
I want to shift gears a little bit here. I feel like there's multiple different paths.
Yeah, go ahead, shift.
Multiple different paths we could take this right now, and we could definitely take a double click right there. But something that I'm interested in, and that I know you've spoken a little bit about, especially on social media, is not only neural optimization, but human optimization in general.
Yeah.
What, one, does human optimization mean to you? And two, what about that fascinates you the most? Is there a specific element, or is it just always testing? Where do you see yourself taking this, and why?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because it's definitely influenced by my own journey and learning. Again, I'm 48, so you'll get some wisdom after doing stuff for a long time and seeing stuff. I think the question, especially, we've seen an acceleration of the transhumanistic agenda at this point to trying to change what it means to be human. And that may be going to happen, right, eventually. But I think some of the fast acceleration towards the concerns I have in healthcare, towards artificial intelligence being the new doctor, it's happening all over the place, towards implanting artificial intelligence in using devices to enhance brain performance, using devices to alter longevity. It's all talked about. It's all kind of it. So even the desensitization towards wearing biometric trackers, Garmin's and Oura rings and Fitbits and all stuff. And we're desensitizing ourselves to the idea that our metrics should be tracked by some type of artificial intelligence computer device all the time. I don't think it'll be a long stretch before they're saying, let's surgically implant them to make it easier. So, the sci-fi movies like Minority Report, The Things in the Eye, they know everything that's going on with you. they can see everything, and you're getting fed information all the time. That deeply concerns me. And I think why? It's because I'm watching health decline over and over and over time. And it's all, to me, directly correlated to how far we deviate from nature. So natural law always is going to supersede any scientific study, any technological intervention. And I like technology. It's not like I don't live a comfortable life and all those things, but the lack of awareness that we're not acknowledging your comfort and technology has a deep biological and physiological price that we're paying. And if we don't start merging the two together in a healthier manner, we may lose what it means to be human as we know it today. And that deeply concerns me.
Talk to me about, you can expand upon this, or we can shift this into habits. because habits shape what we do in our daily life and shape where we go and how we show up in any given day. How do we mesh these two and then integrate them into habits that are not only beneficial, but productive to us furthering the human existence and growing as individuals as well?
So do you mean like, well, let me see if this is what you mean. So what I hear when you ask that, it's habits to me are part of a routine, which to me isn't as sacred as rituals. So they're two very different things. Rituals have a much stronger impact. So attaching meaning to things, that is associated with lifespan and well span and health span. So everybody who lives over 100 and does it well, they are very ritualistic. So they have routines and habits, let's say, but they have a spiritual or emotional meaning attached to them. So it's very different than that. So you do need habits and routines. It does help. And where do habits and routines come from? They come from nature. Nature has cycles. Nature has rhythm. Nature does the same things at the same time throughout different times throughout the season. So you have habits of nature, and the habits in your life should follow nature. Your habits should follow the sun and the moon and the temperature. That's how it should go. So if we lived in connection with nature and had cycles, our habits would go with that. So a habit I do and I teach, I see the sun first thing in the morning every single day. I mean, it takes a lot for that not to happen. So I go from my bed to outside. It's the closest. I'm not ready to live outside in a yurt. Okay. So that would be healthier for me. So I have controlled lighting in my house to simulate sunset time, right? So I control lighting and all that stuff, but connecting, I do as many habits that are connecting to me as if I lived connected to the earth. That's what matters. And then again, it's a very different thing than having rituals. And I have a lot of those as well. I'm not sure if that's what you were asking about.
That was a very good educational moment for me, because I like the difference that you explained between habits and rituals. And maybe sometimes I confuse the words one with the other.
Yeah.
But I appreciate, I almost guarantee that I do. So I appreciate
you can listen, you know how it's like we hear people say, these Russians over 100, and they have like a shot of vodka every night, right? Oh, I do the same thing. So like I have a cigarette or a cigar and a vodka every night. But the reality is that's actually a ritual for them. There's this thing about community and ritual, like how they do it, that has a very different meaning to them. And so it has a very different physiological effect, actually, than if it was just mindless drinking, you know what I mean? Like to distract yourself or numb yourself.
Well, then this brings us back then to the intention behind what it is that you do.
Yep.
So the intention that you then place on the action is actually what affects your physiology.
Yep. And again, it's just attaching meaning. You know, people can, your rituals are going to be based on what you need. And I think it's a very important part of health. I teach my clients, and definitely my courses, it's a part of I do these 90-day courses for women, and teaching them about the morning and what needs to happen in that time. The wake up and the bedtime rituals are the most important thing you're going to do, right? For mindset and neurology. And so it's all connected. Some of those things are routines, of course, but then some are rituals, right? So your visualization practice or your meditation practice is a part of your routine, but that is a part of your ritual. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. The rituals can be part of your routine.
Yes.
Or your daily habit, per se.
Yeah.
What then does your morning or evening routine ritual look like?
It'll change based upon what I feel called to grow in my life. And I have a big giant Post-it note where I write it down to like remind myself of these points, right? So you can have a visual reminder. You don't have to, when you're learning something new, when you are creating a new neural pathway, a new network, a new habit, you change it up. So, but in general, I'll start my morning, like when the wake up, it's just a very quick intentional thought. And I usually pick some mantra, some key phrase. I love Ogmandino's The Greatest Salesman in the World and lots of different, the scrolls. I usually will pick one of something to say that it's just until I can feel it, like, or just a basic mantra of I'm excited for this day. Or I'm grateful for this day. I love my life. Whatever I feel I might need help with, right? That feeling, like, am I struggling with gratitude? I will pick that for a month or something, right? And sometimes it might just be the same mantra for a year. That's the first thing I do before I get out of the bed. So I kind of set that up right there. So the sun, going outside, touching barefoot, grounding, seeing the sun. I do a little bit of breathing, just basic nasal breathing, but I usually say I breathe in love and exhale peace. And I just do like kind of a circular little motion of kind of still setting myself up. I absorb listening to the birds and the squirrels and anything around. Like I want to, like, I don't know, kind of lose myself in the symphony of those sounds and just kind of see how much I can take in that nutrition of the light and the sound into my system. And I know it's nourishing me because I understand what it does neurologically. So there's a lot for me. I'm very cognitive. So I like to know things and what they're doing, and it always makes it more important for me. I have my little supplement stacks that I do, things that I know that are brain performing, enhancing things with my coffee and whatever. And I do a lot. I'm in front of my LED panel every morning, and I'll do a lot of I am affirmations in front of there, or meditate in front of there. I love chanting meditation with malas. It's probably one of my favorite ways. And I'll go through cycles where I'll do it for every day for months or years, and I take a break. Sometimes I'm like, I'm not called to it right now. I sauna every day, every morning, pretty much. And, so those are some of the things. So I sometimes I used to visualize every day, but I'm taking a break right now. But visualization takes 3 to 5 minutes to change the reticular activating system of your brain to set you up. I have little mantra Post-it notes on every door. So every time I go in or out, I always say those things out loud. I use my voice a lot to create, frequency into the ethers of how I want it to be. So it kind of depends. And at night, I use a lot of different light and devices and to be in a meditative state, and just kind of often I'll tell myself, I lucid dream. I've been doing that forever, my whole life. I thought everybody did it. I didn't know it was like a thing that was special. So I have to control my dream state a lot. And so I'll have to tell myself if I want to do that, if I intend to do that. I often go into different dimensions, I think, and I fight a lot of wars. And so it can wear me out. So I'll usually ask for angels to protect me. If I'm going to do that or not, I might go into a different realm and help a patient. And so if I know I'm doing that, I set it up. So I do those kinds of things.
I love it. I think my favorite one that is super intentional behind it, but it's something that through repetition, you continually put out there is the Post-it note on the door. Mm-hmm. It's like the repetition of what you then see.
Notes, there's little ones, right? And then you just say them every time, and you'll have them memorized eventually. And they just got changed. I literally this weekend. So now I have totally new ones. So it's like a totally new experience of, you need to upgrade and change them from time to time. But then the big Post-it notes in my bedroom on the back of the door. So if I ever need to glance at it, eventually you won't need it. Then you look at it like, oh yeah, I need to bring that back. It's the best way if you're trying to add something new. Right? People are like, okay, I'm going to start doing this. I'm like, well, you need to write it down and put it in a flow, because you're just going to, and the whole thing doesn't really take that long. And I do a lot of things at once. Like if I'm sitting in front of the LED panel, where I'm doing the red light therapy, I'm doing something else. I can do, you just meditate or do mantras, or, you can, I could journal, you can do all kinds of stuff while you're doing it. So I go through different periods of when I like to do stuff. I'm an Aquarian, and I like to change it up a lot.
Give me an example of, say, the Post-it note walking into your kitchen. What would that say on it?
So a lot of mine are around abundance and prosperity. So probably my biggest sticking point growing up in poverty on welfare and having a dad who robbed a bank and having federal agents come into your house and, tell you that when you're in the womb, it kind of jacked me up a little bit around that. Right. So it's things like that. abundance comes to me easily. I am extremely wealthy and will always be. I am flow. I create abundance and prosperity to everyone that I touch. I'm a powerful healer in the world. I make a giant impact, stuff like that.
I love it.
Yeah.
You spoke just a second ago about connecting to nature, very first thing you do in the morning. Is that, and I wanted to touch on the upcoming safari retreat you're hosting, is that going to be an element of the retreat, or what is?
That's the whole element.
The entire theme of safari retreat is reconnecting to nature.
On my landing page, it says nature is the way. So it's very intentional that it's an eco safari, not a luxury safari. We will have it's open air tents. You can see the sunrise, see the stars. We're on a giant conservation camp, and lions and elephants, things, they come through. We have armed guards, a safari, we have everything handled, but we'll be safe from that standpoint. But it's designed, you're going to have a bed and there's a shower. You can do that once a day if you feel like it, but it's not about bringing air conditioning and all of that. And we have professional trackers, South African trackers. We will learn animal tracking. We have whole exercises designed, kind of like games we're going to play about being in nature and observing things and going out. What did you see? And then we're going to go out again. Now we're pointing things out to you. So nature is the healer. We will do yoga in the riverbed. We will do yoga and have meditation, and I will do health lectures and all this stuff as well. But it is about being immersed in a primal place. There is zero electricity. You cannot have your phone won't work. There's no laptop. No point in bringing it because we're just going to take it anyway. So it is a true disconnect from all of that and be 10 days in the wild and learn to observe nature, learn to understand, to track them, watch what they do, and to really, really be in it.
I might have to take one of these last spots you have available coming up here.
It's going to be, we have one of the world-renowned trackers. Like, this guy he wants to come and teach and do all this stuff. So it's really, I'm super excited. So Elaine Bylos, who is my travel concierge, she's South African. And so it's like, she's like, we do safari like you guys go to Disneyland. This is what I grew up doing. And so I've done, 200-300s in my life. And, she's in her 60s. She's like, I've been doing this since I was 5 years old. That's what we do. Right. So that is her profession. And she's coordinated, at least I've done 100, at least for clients. This is just how it is. And so I'm super excited with just all of it. I've never been to Africa and I've never been on a safari. So we're also doing, we have a veterinarian coming and another doctor, and they wanted to do, an animal thing. So we're going to be on a helicopter, and nobody has to do everything that we're doing, right? We're like, it's optional. If you don't want, if you're scared, no, we're not making you do anything. Right. And we're going to do one of the veterinarian conservation activities. Like they tag the rhinos or whatever. So we're going to get to do that. So we're doing some fun stuff.
I have the link down here. If anyone that is listening is interested in, I think you said there were 4 spots left as of
today. There's 4 spots. Yep. And it's a carnivore keto retreat. So, we're very upfront with it. I am in the carnivore, keto animal-based community. I'm not going to accommodate vegetarians and vegans. We have private chefs and all that. It's going to be very meat heavy. But we will indulge in any local kind of, because my concierge goes, well, does it have to stay total carnivore? I said, no, I can accommodate some keto people, but just they didn't understand. I'm not going to have gluten-free bread and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be connected to nature, primal, what is local and in season. We're going to eat the local. I'm not bringing in hot dogs. We're eating what animals are there and how they do it in South Africa, right? And of course, if there's some fruit or some honey or whatever. And apparently gin is you got to have a gin in the bush in South Africa. It's a major tradition. So I was like, okay, we can do alcohol, right? But, it's I'll bring all kinds of my own, the good clean coffee, the mold-free stuff, private everything, videographers, photographers. So you're not taking pictures and focusing on that. You will be experiencing it and get to immerse yourself, and it will all be captured for you. All of that's handled, private chef, videographers, photographers, and you can have access to everything afterwards.
I love it. Well, if you are listening and you are interested, I have the link here as brainandbodyrevolution.org/safari. If you want to learn more about Stephanie's upcoming safari retreat to South Africa. Stephanie, I want to be mindful of your time, and I really appreciate this conversation that we've had today. So I have a couple rapid fire questions to wrap up the episode here. And the first one being is, what is your most gifted book and why?
That I give to people?
That you give to people.
Oh, it's a tough one. It is probably that I've actually given the most is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I bought at least 25 copies when that first came out and gave it away. It's an extraordinary book. I have a lot of artist friends and a lot of artist patients, and it speaks to that deeply. I made my son read it. I had his teachers read it. I think it should be like a class that they teach to sixth graders. Big Magic. Yeah.
In terms of your own personal development, who or what has had the biggest impact on you?
Oh, that's tough. I would say, I mean, you always want to go like my mom, right? I mean, that's the answer. I'm like, well, of course, my mother, because she's a badass and all that things. And then she's like my big hero. But I would have to say, professionally, it would be Barry Bellegarde, who's no longer with us.
If you could have a conversation with someone living or not, who would it be and why?
Oh, yeah, it's a good one too. So right now, I'm focused on, I really have a lot of questions about our past and what it means to be human and how did we get here. So Thoth, who wrote the Emerald Tablets about 36,000 years ago or so, that would be who I'd want to talk to.
Final two is, if you could tell your 10-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Ha! Oh, one thing. I probably would, it's so bad. Invest in Bitcoin real early.
Taking a very practical approach to this
I am.
one, huh?
I'm a Capricorn moon. Screw it. You know what, honey? Bitcoin, compound interest Bitcoin.
I love it. Last but not least, in your opinion, what is the single most important thing someone can do to live a happy, healthy, and fulfilling life?
God, single most. I want to say meditation, but I'm also struggling with the connection to nature. So I do think nature will help guide you into your natural meditative state, because the earth drives your brain waves into alpha anyway. And that is what people are trying to do when they meditate. And in nature will bring so much alpha and theta into you that it's very easy to go inside and find your inner divine self, because the answers are all within you. They are not without. So there's a combination answer. How about meditate
in nature is what I was going to say. There's the glue that pulls those two together.
Yeah.
Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for taking the time today. I want to open the floor. Is there anything else you'd like to say, add, do? The floor is yours.
No, probably that. I do think ending with people remembering, or at least like thinking, like we don't need to keep looking outside of ourselves so much for answers. You are the divine. You need to go inside. And if meditation feels overwhelming to you, or you're like, I can't do it, I say focus, beginning on something called focus concentration meditation that's using a chant. Because by activating your throat and your vagus nerve, that's what you're doing when you make sound, whenever you talk, hum, sing, gargle, it activates your parasympathetic rest and digest, and it helps change your brainwave state. So I love Sanskrit chanting. Meditation, if somebody starts with that, or even just Om, right? There's a reason there's that sound. And you sit and do that. You get beads. It gives your hands something to do. All the answers are within you. You don't need to look to any external agency, person, priest, anything. I'm not a religious person as the way, I don't follow anything. I would be agnostic, but every sacred text says the exact same thing, that you are God. Go inside, and the answers are all within you. They all say it. but that part of the story seems to be getting overwritten by the church organization. So that would be the thing. You are the healer. I heal nobody. You heal you. I do nothing other than am a guide to direct you to your own inner resources, and it takes over. So please start understanding you are powerful. You did it. Stop thanking some other creature for healing you. You did that. You did it. So that's where I'll end on that.
I love it. And what a wonderful kind of bookend to this episode. So Stephanie, again, thank you so much for taking the time out today, and have an absolutely amazing rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Hey, it's Kevin here. And before I let you go, I wanted to let you know that the complete show notes for this episode, as well as any other, can be found at kevinwathey.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a short review on Apple Podcasts. I love reading the reviews, and they're often the tipping point in helping us book some very hard to reach guests. Now, if you want to or would like to receive a weekly email from me called the Weekly Mindful Memo, head over to kevinwathey.com/VIP to subscribe. By signing up, you'll receive exclusive behind-the-scenes access and be the first to know about upcoming episodes, retreats, and more direct to your inbox. Again, you can sign up to receive the Weekly Mindful Memo by going to kevinwathey.com/VIP. Thank you for listening. Much love, and have a wonderful rest of your day.